new PTR update. This was November 9th, 3 days ago. This is the Reddit post that just basically transcribes what was on the forums. And we had a couple of reverts. I guess these aren't specifically mentioned here. So I'm just going to go through this post here and what is currently in the works or currently being planned by Blizzard, apparently. One thing that they did revert was the Demon Hunter mana burn range decrease that I suggested from 300 range to 250 range. They reverted, which I'm a bit sad about. I was hoping that that might make it through and that might make more heroes playable. I think one of the frustrating things about mana burn, well, it's frustrating in its entirety, but one of the frustrating things is that it works against every hero. It seems like there should be some heroes against which mana burn is really good, and then some against which it's not very good, as most heroes have some strengths and weaknesses. And the obvious choice there should be better against melee heroes, because they're always closer to the front of the battle, and worse against ranged heroes. Should be hard to get to, which I think the mana burn range nerf would have made sense. But yeah, I guess they're not going to go through with that, which I find a bit sad. I feel like still mana burn is a very, very restrictive spell, a very restrictive mechanic, but it is what it is. Especially nowadays, Demon Hunter being fast already, you give him boots, and normally he always gets to every hero to burn that he wants. Unless in some very rare scenarios, like with Ensnare Lock and stuff like that, maybe with Mass Slow, but that is hard to accomplish. Very hard. Whereas playing the Demon Hunter in the mana burn role is normally a lot easier to execute than to counter. So many things with Night Elf. But anyways, yeah, that was one thing that was reverted. Blizzard, I guess, has to be commended here. They've been iterating a lot on this PTR. They've been taking in feedback from many different sources. And this is what we are currently standing with. Pungent Stink with the resub. Thank you. All right, starting off with the humans. They're getting a lot of buffs, which doesn't seem the worst. Of course, over the last few years, humans have been doing the worst out of all the 4 races, clearly. Although, over the last half year, maybe even longer, they've been doing quite a bit better as well, thanks especially to Sock and Fortitude, who've been playing really well, and have been showing how human can be played, what the potential really is. But still, in recent history, human certainly has looked the weakest. So a couple of buffs here make sense. But it's important always to keep in mind what is the overall sum of all the changes, the sum of all the buffs and nerfs. It's hard to gauge, if there's like 5 nerfs versus 5 buffs. Does that exactly mean that one race is hugely improved and the other race is hugely weakened? Or are these changes so tiny that it doesn't make that big of a difference in the grand scheme of things? Having the perfect assessment and being able to gauge that is very difficult. But still, even if it's hard to do, I think it's still worth remembering and keeping in the back of your head, okay, how many buffs and nerfs do we have coming in? And which ones of those, I guess this is the more important part, which ones of those are going to be really relevant, most likely. All right, that was my little preamble. Now, let's get into the thick of things. Archmage strength has been increased. Strength gain from 1.8 to 2. So this means that he gets a little bit more strength, but this doesn't translate to the AM is going to have 1 more strength on every level. If he got 1 more every level, that would be really, really strong. No, what this means is that when he gets from level 1 to level 2, he's going to have 1 more strength. But then moving on, level 3, 4, 5, and so on, he's going to have the same amount of strength. So it's tiny, tiny buff for level 2 Archmage specifically. Which is pretty good, I guess. Pretty good. Why not? Is the squishiest hero in the game. And, yeah. Don't think this warrants any risk. Military duration has been talked about a bunch. Of course, way back in the day when it was nerfed from 45 to 40 seconds was a big blow to the humans. Back then, human was really strong, was kind of dominating. 2013, 14 was all about the humans. Now we're taking a step back. I've said before that I don't really agree with this change, because if human is to be strengthened, I think they should be strengthened in areas where they are lacking at the moment. For example, tier 3 viability. So many human strategies revolve all around tier 2, and their toolkit is greatly limited because on tier 2 they are strong enough, they don't need tier 3. So instead of buffing them early game with militia, I would have much preferred to see them buffed late game to give them tier 3, to give them more tools, to increase variety. As we know, higher tech and more bases almost always lead to more exciting games and more enjoyable games to watch. So I'm still not in agreement. That's not the right word. I don't know what the word is right now. I don't agree with this change entirely, to be honest. I don't think this is a buff that human needs altogether. It's a buff that will make humans stronger all around. Militia can be used to creep, can be used to fight in the middle of the map for map control, but most importantly, the very most important thing for militia duration is expanding. And I've said this many times, I'll say it again. Human fast expansion is the strongest fast expansion in the game already. Buffing them there, where they're already the best, doesn't seem very reasonable to me. So I do disagree with this change. That being said, it's 2.5 seconds. It's not huge, so I don't think it's catastrophic. All right, Mountain King Bash. Yeah, a lot of changes have been made. A lot of attempts have been made by Blizzard. We had some crazy ones in there with like a 6-second bash stun duration on level 3 or something like that. This is good. This is reasonable. So the bash chance will go up a bit, and the damage will go up a bit. All right, this is fine. I like this. Pally buff as well on the aura. A little bit of a buff instead of the crazy buff that they were first proposing. That was completely insane. I would love to see more Pally play. Maybe this encourages more Pally first or Pally second play. That would be cool. Again, I agree with this change. This is good. And Pally move speed increase. Obviously, I agree with this one. I've been crying for this one for like 2 years or something. I was hoping for more move speed, but hey, I'll take it if it does make it through. This plus this should make the Pally way more viable of a first hero option, which I would love to see. Especially for a long time, humans were only ever able to play AM first. Recently, I've been seeing more MK first as well. That's cool, but making Paladin a playable first hero would also be nice. And this is a really good change. Priest cast point improved and heal cooldown increased, so this is going to make it, hopefully, we don't know exactly if it's going to work 100%, but this should hopefully make the priest more reliable with a dispel and give us fewer cases to cry for the dispel meme. And this is the one that excites me the most, actually. More supply for keep and castle. I talked earlier about how I think human, instead of being helped early game, should be helped late game to encourage them more to go tier 3, to encourage more diverse play with higher tech. And this is cool. Every human's always going to go to tier 2 anyways, so having a 2 supply bump here is nice. But going to castle now is also going to give you 2 more supply. And if you combine it together, if you go to castle, compared to the past, you will have 4 more supply. Is that a huge buff? No, it's not enormous, but it's a little nice buff. We saw with the Great Hall for Orc how just 1 more supply can make quite the difference. When you're going for a very specific, tailor-made build, this could lead to some changes, possibly. And it's not too big to be outlandish and dangerous. So this is, I think, of all the patch changes, I like this the most. Plus the Pally move speed, of course. All right, now comes the big one. This one came completely out of left field. Moonwell mana regen reduced from 1.5 to 1.35. That's a 10% decrease in regeneration. This means regeneration at night or moonstone time, you know. But the Moonwell, of course, still spawns with 100 mana, like it always did. So it's not exactly a 10% Moonwell nerf, Moon Juice nerf. It's just regen nerf. So it's a little bit less than 10%. It's hard to gauge a change like that. How much impact is this going to have? I think someone did the math. Per nighttime, it's going to be like 40 mana less or something like that. Yeah, I think somewhere around there. So this shouldn't be too much of a nerf. I wonder where it comes from, though. Where does it come from? Why? If we're trying to target specific problems, why are we nerfing a race entirely? Moonwells are the backbone of sustain for Night Elf. And this is the crucial point that I see here, the crucial issue, except for when you have bears. Bears are played a lot already and you could argue, are a bit of a problem against human and also in Night Elf Mirror. It's all about bear mirror. We all love that one, don't we? And having the Moonwells nerfed means that Night Elves, logically speaking, should be relying more on bears and rejuve in the future, because this will still be a reliable source of healing. So this is why I really disagree with this change. Instead, I would have rather seen it the other way around. If you want to nerf Night Elf healing, then nerf rejuve a little bit. Not Moonwells. Why are Moonwells being nerfed? This is a nerf all across the board for Night Elf. Again, it might be a small nerf. It might not be very significant, but it certainly is a nerf for all Night Elf strategies and for Night Elf healing. Again, forcing them more into bears and rejuve. And this is, of course, a pattern for me. I always hope to see changes and game design that encourages very diverse play. You can play many different strategies. In theory, for example, is something Undead could do. They have many sources of healing. They have aura, coil, statues. They have the ritual dagger. So if you have many sources of healing, many things you can rely on, then there's many avenues possible. And healing is already kind of a limiting factor for Night Elf. When we see Mountain Giant strats, when we see Talon strats, we see always healing is the limiting factor. Healing is the issue. With this healing nerf, I foresee just more bears having to be played, which is why I really disagree with this. What I would have seen much rather is maybe rather nerf rejuve and buff some other kind of healing. Now, Moonwell healing would be very risky to go for, because Moonwell healing is good early game already. If you make it even better, they can really dominate, especially with the Keeper and Immolation and stuff like that. I would have much rather seen another form of healing, maybe. Maybe the heal potion in the Night Elf shop only costs 100 gold. Is that doable? Is that feasible? I haven't thought this through all the way to consider what would be the best solution. But this one I don't like. Because, the way I foresee this going, it's just, okay, Night Elf now has to play bears for healing. Yeah, so much for that. Demon Hunter Immolation activation cost increase from 1 to 10. I think this is too much. I think this is too much of a Demon Hunter nerf on Immolation. Like I said before, I don't think Immolation is the problem. I think mana burn is the problem. Not early game strength, but late game, I think mana burn is way better. We see it with Tome of Retraining all the time. And again, for build diversity, for strategy diversity, mana burn is the issue. So I really disagree with these changes. This one isn't really a nerf. This one doesn't matter. I can also see that, like, there being basically no activation cost is kind of weird. But I think 10 mana is way too much. Make it 4 or 5 mana. I could get behind that. But yeah. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but I vehemently believe that Immolation is not our problem. I think mana burn is. And mana burn is the thing that should be properly nerfed. But I guess that ship has sailed. Now, this is the biggest question mark of the patch. Seeing a Warden buff is kind of cool, because the Warden's kind of underplayed. She's looking a bit weak at the moment, and she's an exciting hero to play and to watch. But these are big numbers. The Blink is already a big increase in mobility, a big buff to the Warden, but this one is the one that is potentially worrying. Of course, the damage cap on Foul Knives gets increased. So, not the damage that each unit takes, that remains the same, but the amount of targets you can hit. And we saw this having a big effect, for example, when the Panda received a similar treatment a couple of patches ago. The Breath of Fire max damage was greatly reduced on the Panda, and suddenly didn't look that good anymore. Then the max damage was increased again, and bam, Panda was back on the menu, boys. And this is going to make the Warden a lot better in big fights. Is this going to be good? Is this going to be bad? Is this going to be too strong? Is this going to be a touch too much? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. The issue, of course, is when the Warden gets level 5 and 6, she sometimes seems unbeatable already. this now is going to make that the case even more. Like, once a Warden is level 6, tier 2 human is never ever going to be able to beat her anymore. But you could argue they couldn't beat her already anyways. But this is going to make it easier for her to get to level 5 and 6. Yeah. This could lead to a Warden meta, which is the biggest problem for human, I would say. Orc doesn't care about the Warden. Undead has really good counter to the Warden, especially thanks to statues. And Coil and Aura. Lots of healing passively. Yeah. This could be a problem for human versus Night Elf, but I'm not confident that it will be. So I'm a bit apprehensive about this change, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it because the Warden has been looking a bit weak. Mana Flare nerf is good. Mana Flare was buffed back when human was too good against Night Elf. That is quite some time ago. Dreadlord movement speed increase, also good. One of the weakest heroes in the game. Spike Carapace buff, also very good. One of the worst abilities in the game. Necromancer buffs. I like that they kind of went back on this. It was a big buff to Raise Dead before. Like I said in my video before, having a Raise Dead mass necro meta could be very, 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 very stupid and boring if every game is just an all-in push. This makes Cripple better and Skeletal Mastery a little bit better, but hopefully not leading to a mass necro meta. Like I said before, I think the way better approach to buffing and changing the Necromancer would be to change Unholy Frenzy. That when you cast Unholy Frenzy, before applying the buff of Unholy Frenzy, you first have it dispel. And like I explained before, the way Purge works, Purge, first you dispel it, and then it applies the slow of the Purge ability. The Unholy Frenzy could work very similarly. You use Unholy Frenzy, first you dispel a single target, doing only very little damage to summons, and then after the buff is applied. That would give Undead a second source of dispel, perhaps finally make them playable on tier 2, would give the Necromancer an interesting new role, whereas this is kind of like, you know, just touching the sliders a bit. I doubt this will make the Necro playable, but we'll see. Nerub Tower being nerfed a lot. Especially against Hero, it's going to be much weaker because it only slows for 3 seconds instead of 5, and the attack rate is decreased. It is understandable somewhat because the Nerub Tower is insanely strong. Since you need Ziggurats already and it only costs 100 gold to upgrade the Nerub, Nerub is by far the best tower in the game. So having it nerfed kind of makes sense on paper in that regard, but considering the fact that Undead isn't really favored right now, except against Night Elf maybe with Frenzy timing, where Nerub Towers aren't really important. This seems to be a nerf to me just for the sake of nerfing something. Nerub Towers aren't really a problem. And the main reason why I disagree with this change is that what Nerubs nowadays are mainly best for is securing your expansion. And I'm always in favor of having many different races being able to expand. Like I mentioned before, and I've said many times, 2-base and 3-base play with high tech is almost always the most entertaining and cool Warcraft that we can hope for. And weakening the Nerub weakens the Undead expansion, which is why I am not in favor of it. If Undead was to be weakened, one change here is missing. I talked about this before. I think there's one problem where Undead is too strong right now, and that is Frenzy Ghoul timing. Frenzy Ghouls, interesting unit, very good early game for creeping, then really crap in the mid game, then really good with Frenzy when tier 3 hits, and then they're going to taper off as the late game goes on and heroes get stronger and so on. So it's kind of interesting how there's a dynamic there, and you have to wisely use them at the right time, and you know, it's a lot of skill expression, all that stuff. But I think Frenzy is just ready too fast. It's a 60-second upgrade that I think comes in too quickly. The Frenzy timing is too disruptive to a dynamic game. Oftentimes the Frenzy timing hits, you attack, and then you win the game there right away. I think the Frenzy timing should be slowed down, nerfed by increasing the upgrade time. Like I suggested before, 25 seconds, 30 seconds increase, something like that on Frenzy, I think would be the proper way to nerf Undead, if Undead was to be nerfed, but instead it's a Nerub Tower, which I don't think makes sense. And then this is also an interesting change. that I really don't know how it's going to turn out at all. Abomination and Fiends both have their turn rates increased. This is a buff. This means they turn faster. And this, of course, makes them better to micro. How much better? How much efficiency can you squeeze out of that as a pro player? I think A-bombs here isn't really that relevant, but Fiends for kiting, when you have to go back and forth, that could be. But I could not confidently say here what to expect. It's going to be a little buff. Is it going to be a big buff? Is it going to make Fiends way better? We've been seeing Fiends falling off quite a bit lately because of the strength of Frenzy Ghouls. Yeah, I'm interested to see how this is going to turn out. Honestly, I'm a bit worried that it's going to make Fiends too good. I'm a bit worried that Fiends with move speed advantage and the kiting ability that gets increased here, that good players, really good players, can just, play Fiends now insanely well with the kiting. Worries me a little bit. But I don't know where exactly it's going to land. And yeah, Bladestorm buff. I love it. Very good. I think all ults should be good. They are an epic moment in the game. Spirit Walkers being buffed across the board. Their build time and upgrade time gets reduced. They've gone back on this quite a bit. I think it used to be a lot more time decrease, so a lot more of a timing buff for Walkers. I still don't really agree with this change. I think Raider Walkers are in a decent spot for Orc. I think right now there's a very healthy mix between Shaman and Walker play. Shamans come out quick, but they're not that good in the late game. Walkers take longer, but they're better in the late game. Different ways to build your strategies. Now with the Walkers being faster, I am afraid that Shaman is just going to have no use anymore. Why go for Shaman when you can have Walkers? All of a sudden you can have Dispel way earlier. And so I don't agree with this change. I agree with this change. Upgrades, 3 of them being reduced in Lumber. Orc is sometimes Lumber starved for key moments in the game. And what I hope most this might help with is tier 3 transitions. Especially when Orc goes tier 3. That's when Lumber really becomes an issue. And I'm always a proponent of enabling as much tier 3 and expansion play as possible. Headhunters being buffed again. I agree with that. That's good. They certainly seem to be a bit overnerfed. We've hardly been seeing them at all lately. And then Torrents also being reduced greatly in build time by 5 seconds. Is that going to make them playable? I don't think so. I think they also need to be cheaper, and then maybe they're playable. But it's a step in the right direction. Firelord, Incinerate buff, Lava Spawn buff, Volcano buff. This is good. There's one worrying thing here with Lava Spawn split. There used to be a time when we saw a lot of Firelord tower rushes, and that was nauseating. But with where the meta is right now, with Facio Hammer play for the Orcs, and with Night Elves being able to use Treants or Immolation, it seems like all the races are very well set up early game to withstand a tower push. And of course, Human and Undead is not tower pushable anyways. Then we got a couple of item changes. Tome has 2 charges, Staff has 2 charges, that's all good. Crystal Ball moved from level 3 to 2 and made a charged item, not a permanent item. This is a really cool change. Like that a lot. Ring of Protection plus 3 moved from the drop table. That's okay, I guess. We've been seeing a ton of rings. It's been a few too many rings. This one, though, I really disagree with. I've said this many times before, and honestly, this one I find sad and almost annoying. Claws plus 4 being buffed again to Claws plus 5. In my opinion, it took 20 years for us to properly balance this table. As you may remember, we used to have Circlet and Claws plus 6 and Gloves and Ring. 4 items in this table we used to have. And only one of them was balanced. Only one of them was as strong as it should be, considering the strength of that creep camp. And that was the Gloves. Only the Gloves were properly balanced. The Ring plus 2 was too weak. The Claws and the Circlet were too strong. And the Circlet has been removed from that drop table, which I think was a wise choice, actually. but now the claws are getting buffed again. I think Gloves of Haste and Claws of Attack +4, they are very even in power level. I think it's great to have them drop from that creep camp. Now, I think what has turned out surprisingly, the Ring +4, the third item in the current drop table, is the one item that is too strong, in my opinion. Especially if you have it on an early game brawler, like a Demon Hunter, or maybe even... Demon Hunter is the one that comes to mind most. Maybe like a Blade Master with salves and stuff. Ring +4 is insanely strong. So what I would much rather like to see is keep the Claws +4 the way they are, nerf the Ring +4 to Ring +3, but then there's still one issue with this drop table, and that's that we only have 3 items from this drop table. Claws, Gloves, and Ring. That's still the same. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think we should add 2 more items. 2 more items to this drop table, and that would be, I don't know a term for it, a word for it, but we could make up a name for the item. But I would love to see, essentially, mini Sobi Mask and mini Rune Bracers. 2 more items for this drop table. And the mini Sobi Mask would give 20% mana regen, and the mini Rune Bracers would give 15% spell resistance. And I think then we would have a really cool table. We would have 3 aggressive items, 2 defensive items, and I think all would be pretty well balanced. And I think this is why we're doing this whole, feedback thing in the first place. We want to have a balanced game. And yeah, this is, I think, not really reaching the core of the issue at all. In my opinion. Neutral units here being nerfed a bit with the move speed, especially good for the Assassin, who's super good. Frost Armor Slow is also good that it gets nerfed because, it's just really annoying. And then we have a bunch of bug fixes and map changes that don't really matter. All right. That's it from me. Newest update on the update of the PTR. I wonder if there's going to be a new one coming out. I don't think so. I imagine there's going to be the last PTR. It doesn't have to be. Perhaps they're going to make another iteration of it. But yeah, excited to see where we're going to land. And the big question is, when is the patch going to hit? What would be really, really stupid is if it hits next week, right before Rara Land. Would also be kind of exciting, but also kind of weird. But yeah, anyways, that is my feedback. I'm going to give another one if there's another PTR update. We'll see.